This is Frances Castaneda-Dice with the Houston East End Chamber of Commerce, and it's an honor to welcome you to our Feel Good Fridays. We started this during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we wanted to showcase good stories that are happening in our community, good stories that are happening to companies that are doing good during this COVID-19 pandemic. And we're very honored to have two wonderful people that are very active in the East End community. First, we're going to hear from Roland von Kurnatowski. Hopefully I said that correct, Roland. And then we're also going to hear from Michael Walter with Valero Houston Refinery. Both of their organizations have stepped up to the challenge and are making a difference in our community and making a difference in the stopping the spread of the COVID-19. So without further ado, I want to just get into the conversation and introduce you to Roland, who will start talking about TXRX Labs. Welcome, Roland.
Howdy. Sure. So I can tell you a little bit about TXRX. We're a nonprofit, what's called Makerspace, which is kind of like a gym, but for people who want to do technical or scientific or manufacturing type tasks. So we have shared space, we have shared equipment, we offer classes, etc. in a 60,000 square foot space we have, located up by Champburger actually. How long?
Yeah, and that's great. And I know that you guys, how long have you been in here opened up for business?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How long have you been open for business?
Yeah, so we've been up here for 7 years. We've been focusing originally on training and then moved into job training, youth programs, and prototyping.
And I know you work a lot with our schools here in the community. How has that been, not being able to work with some of the schools during this time?
Yeah, we work with primarily with Austin, Eastwood, and Energy. They've been helping us out during this time, especially with some of our PPE manufacturing.
Well, why don't we get into that? The next slide is going to show us some photos of the PPE that you and TXRX Labs are making. We'd love for you to tell us how you got into this and what sparked that idea.
Sure. So we do a lot of prototyping actually already. So we do kind of across the board. We work with small folks, individuals who have an idea, and want to, try to bring it to life, up to prototyping for Fortune 50 companies. We're a prototyping partner for Marmon, which is Berkshire Hathaway's arm, along with a couple of the oil and gas companies and waste management. And so, we've always done prototyping, and when we kind of, started seeing that there was a possible PPE shortage, the truth was we were watching what was going on in Italy and Europe, them kind of already issues. There was a lot of PPE shortages there, and folks within the manufacturing community there were actually already, kind of heeding the call and trying to produce PPE and other types of devices. And so we saw a lot of that coming across on the kind of, news that we were watching. And so we thought, well, if things go poorly here, then that need might also arise. And so we kind of started prototyping stuff a couple weeks before, things started, I guess you'd say, turning. And as such, we had a couple of devices, already done. So face shields, intubation boxes, testing dividers, and such, fit testing hoods, stuff like that had been in short supply there. We had already had prototypes of one of the hospitals, Memorial Hermann. We have a friend who is a friend of the purchasing manager. And so he received a call from the purchasing manager there, and they said, hey, would you guys like to help out? And we said, sure, we've already been looking at some of these things. Here are the prototypes we have. And so we were able to get them into the ER. They tested them, gave us some feedback. We made some tweaks. They gave us some feedback. And then we started doing small batch production of those items using our 3D printers and laser cutters and water jets and stuff here. And then, as we started doing that, people kind of kept calling and asking for more and different things. Other kind of hearing that we were helping Memorial Hermann out, and they started calling. And so at that point, Michael Skelly, who is a friend of ours and neighbor right up the street, came by and said, well, maybe y'all should do a GoFundMe to help support all the raw materials and kind of scaling that we needed to do. And so we ran a GoFundMe campaign, and that aided by some donations by some foundations and CIMEX and a number of other groups, netted enough revenue or enough for us to basically take the products that we were doing small kind of 3D printing production of, maybe 300 or 400 units a day, to injection molding and other kind of mass production using manufacturers we were already familiar with. And so that's kind of what's gotten to us to the point where we're at today. And so what we've really done is kind of validate designs and then get production ramped up. And so now the manufacturers that are producing these items are producing, the injection molding folks that we're working with, Texas Injection Molding, produce about 7,000 to 8,000 face shields a day now. And they're ramping that up as kind of folks need them from them. And then our mask production folks are producing 2,000 to 3,000 cloth masks per day now. And then Sanawell, that does all our intubation box and barriers, is producing 10 to 20 of those units a day as needed. And we're now focused mostly on a prototype of what's called a PAPR, positive air pressure respirator, and an N95 elastomeric half mask. But those have to be certified, and so we've got prototypes of those done, and we actually have some of them in use, or PAPRs in use in the OR, being used in conjunction with a Stryker flight helmet. And the testing has been pretty good, and so we're just working on the kind of taking that to NIOSH approval now. That was maybe more than you wanted to know about.
No. That is very, very helpful, because again, I've driven by TXRX Labs, and it's a big, beautiful warehouse, and you just didn't imagine such greatness is coming out of there. And I know that you have partners everywhere else, but it's another showcase of how teamwork is very important during this time. And other members that we had, like Carlos from Gulf Coast Distillery, same thing. They saw what was happening in Spain, and so they got prepared for this. And it's nice to know that everyone else was doing the same thing too. And you and your team was able to take into that consideration and produce this way ahead of the game. So congratulations to you. Has other organizations come to you for ideas, other maker spaces in maybe other cities?
Have other organizations come to us? I think early on we had some groups come to us and ask questions about what we were doing and how we were doing it. I think there's a lot of groups out there doing this, and so I think there's a lot of different models and a lot of different ways these things happen. So we definitely talked with some folks and shared the designs and shared some of the other type of expertise we have. We've done a lot of work with some of the prototyping groups, the hospitals, helping them with fabrication or testing in Houston and specifically. And some work with groups like in Atlanta and stuff, who share designs with and done testing with as well.
Well, I know last week was Nurses Appreciation Week, and I think we have to thank you and your team because you're helping them do their job, and you also are heroes, just like they are, in my opinion. So thank you so much, Roland, for that. And I know that something big is coming up for TXRX Labs, your new East End Maker Hub, rather. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know it's a positive thing that's coming to our community.
Yeah, sure. So we, through the last 11 years, we've seen a lot of need from companies and individuals, and especially small startups, but even large companies, for the ability to have prototyping space or small fabrication spaces. And in a community that's targeted for them. And so We've seen that here with a lot of companies that co-locate with us. We have a number of startups, a number of crafters and manufacturers who co-locate with us. But our space is relatively small in regards to the amount of kind of space they need, and so we partner with the Easton Management District and UP CDC to open a 320,000 square foot facility up on Navigation at the old Baker Hughes drill bit manufacturing facility, actually at 6501 Navigation. And so we'll be that'll be opening at the end of this year. We'll be there we have 70,000 square feet of kind of all new space and a bunch of additional equipment. And then that will also be that, our service will be offered to folks, and then they'll be able to rent space there. So there's about 230,000 square feet of space, but it's a little bit different than I think a lot of other space. A lot of their space in town is either just kind of plain warehouse or office space. You can almost think of this as like a co-working space for manufacturers and startups. And so we'll have private spaces that are really targeted towards manufacturing and or prototyping. And then we'll have a shared areas that kind of shared amenities, loading docks, material handling equipment, fabrication equipment, et cetera. And so that'll be opening up at the, I think the current date is October of this year.
That's great. And then some of the pictures that you have right here, the picture that we're looking at, are people going to be able to rent space, lease space?
Yeah. So sadly, I'm not we've been doing this for 3 years. So we started 3 years ago. We had, it's funded by the government through Section 108. And so it's a long process. The government is, we've hit one hurricane, a government shutdown, a coronavirus crisis so far. So it's definitely hit some roadblocks, but we've made it through. That picture was the first picture. I actually made that picture myself 3.5 years ago. So we have a lot of other renderings now. So I just say that picture was just kind of when we had a very rough concept and we were trying to tell people about what it is. And I'm an engineer, not a graphic designer. But yes, individuals will be able to rent everything from 200 to 20,000 square foot spaces, both we call heavy kind of fabrication, which is basically insulated but not climate controlled, where kind of fabrication space, to more type of industrial, light industrial manufacturing spaces, so, and prototyping spaces, so kind of white boxed, climate controlled spaces. And all of that will be co-located with TXArc. So we'll offer shared conference rooms, shared tools, classes, and then also access to our staff of electrical, mechanical engineers, welders, woodworkers, machinists, to help with prototyping and manufacturing.
That's great. And we're going to open it up for any questions that people may have, and they can just type that in our Q&A box. But Roland, how do you see this coronavirus pandemic? I know it's put a little stop again on your future plans, but how do you see this benefiting and making you guys stronger?
How do I see this making us stronger? For us, we've met a lot of people we wouldn't have met otherwise. Our message that we've been trying to we've been trying to tell the medical center folks for a long time that prototyping and manufacturing within Houston is something that is a resource that should have been tapped. I think, coming out of this, the medical center will become more interested in integrating with the kind of manufacturing and prototyping that's going on within Houston, and those type of areas which they've maybe shied away from. I think to some degree, all of this we'll see if anybody learns the lesson or not, but there has been some light shown on the fact that, strategically, that manufacturing is actually a strategic resource. That if you, offshore everything in regards to raw material production and manufacturing, that leaves us quite vulnerable to a lot of instances like this and other types of problems. And I think people have ignored that in light of cost concerns or cost pressures. But hopefully, we'll see if anybody learns a lesson out of it or not. But hopefully that people will learn that there is value, strategic value to local manufacturing, and we'll find ways to promote and therefore also secure ourselves in that regard. I think those are probably some of the biggest positives that have come out of this so far.
That's great. And then I've got a question here is the makerspace open for anyone to join?
Yeah, we have just a general membership. Anyone can join. We have personal memberships, and then we also have corporate memberships. And so, it's like I said, very much like a gym. You do have to receive some training, so you do have to take classes or prove through checkouts your proficiency with areas. But other than that, it's open to everyone.
Great. That's great. And we're going to open it up for any questions that people may have, and they can just type that in our Q&A box. But Roland, how do you see this coronavirus pandemic? I know it's put a little stop again on your future plans, but how do you see this benefiting and making you guys stronger?
How do I see this making us stronger? For us, we've met a lot of people we wouldn't have met otherwise. Our message that we've been trying to we've been trying to tell the medical center folks for a long time that prototyping and manufacturing within Houston is something that is a resource that should have been tapped. I think, coming out of this, the medical center will become more interested in integrating with the kind of manufacturing and prototyping that's going on within Houston and those type of areas which they've maybe shied away from. I think to some degree, all of this we'll see if anybody learns the lesson or not, but there has been some light shown on the fact that, strategically, that manufacturing is actually a strategic resource. That if you, offshore everything in regards to raw material production and manufacturing, that leaves us quite vulnerable to a lot of instances like this and other types of problems. And I think people have ignored that in light of cost concerns or cost pressures. But, hopefully, we'll see if anybody learns a lesson out of it or not, but hopefully that people will learn that there is value, strategic value to local manufacturing, and we'll find ways to promote and therefore also secure ourselves in that regard. I think those are probably some of the biggest positives that have come out of this so far.
That's great. And then I've got a question here is the makerspace open for anyone to join?
Yeah, we have just a general membership. Anyone can join. We have personal memberships, and then we also have corporate memberships. And so, it's like I said, very much like a gym. You do have to receive some training, so you do have to take classes or prove through checkouts your proficiency with areas. But other than that, it's open to everyone.
Great. And another question here is, I know that you mentioned working with youth. What ages do you allow in the makerspace?
Well, we generally have special youth programs. And so generally everything that's not part of a youth program is 18 and up. We do make some exceptions for some of the kind of non-industrial processes. So laser cutting, 3D printing, that sort of stuff. We generally make those allow individuals who are really all ages, as long as they're supervised, to do those types of activities. But welding, machining, woodworking, the deal with more dangerous industrial tools, those are all 18 and up. Even with adult supervision, it's still off limits to folks who are not 18 years old.
So with summer coming up, and hopefully the new precautions are going to be made, are you going to be offering any programs for kids this summer?
We're looking at that still, to be honest with you. If we were going to run them, we're trying to figure out, what that looks like now. Sadly, a lot of our classes and a lot of our programs, it's very difficult to kind of maintain social distancing, and then, it's all shared tools and equipment, right? And so it's very difficult for people not to constantly be touching the same tools and equipment, and therefore kind of be also in close proximity. So, we're looking at how we might do those. I think that's still an unopened question. We haven't really solved that problem yet. But if we do, we will for sure, continue to run those classes. And if we can't solve those problems, I think to our satisfaction, we'll probably have to hold off until maybe next summer.
Great. And then I've got another question here. Will there be any job opportunities with TXRX's new location in October, specifically for the more vulnerable population?
Yeah, so I mean, part of our goal with the new facility is really job creation for the East End. So we're big believers. TXRX's kind of whole like concept is that, I think when a lot of people talk about innovation, they speak of digital innovation. But the sad thing about digital innovation, while it's great, if you make a website or an app or anything like that, the problem is that the jobs generally created by those types of innovation are, kind of white collar, top tier jobs, right? Programmers, data scientists, folks who've attended four-year universities generally and, or hold advanced certifications. Manufacturing is one of the areas where there is still really, really good jobs that don't necessarily require four-year degrees. If you're a water jet operator, a press brake operator, a machinist, those jobs can pay $20, $30, dollars an hour plus for someone who's skilled. And so, bringing those types of jobs, I say the tail on manufacturing is long versus, other types of innovation. And so our real goal with the Maker Hub is to bring manufacturing innovators to this area, thereby generating jobs for the local residents in those type of areas. That's why a lot of our startups are companies that do, for instance, pipeline inspection robotics or sports robotics, welding, manufacturing, 3D printing. They're all in these kind of areas where there's a lot of technicians, a lot of machine operators and such who are needed.
Thank you for that. And I think we don't have any more questions or time for questions until the very end, but I'm going to introduce everyone to Michael Walter with Valero Houston Refinery, and then we'll continue questions for both Roland and for Michael. So it is my honor to introduce everyone to Michael Walter. Michael is with Valero Houston Refinery, but he's also a board member of the Chamber, and we're very grateful to have him and to share all the wonderful things that his organization is doing. Michael, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you, Francis. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Just a little bit about Valero. I think everybody knows us from our retail presence. Everybody has seen a Valero station on the corner. But we, in addition to being the second largest independent refiner, we're also one of the world's largest renewable fuels producers. And so Valero is really invested in doing a lot across the energy space. And part of what is part of our culture is sharing some of that success with the community. So we've really had a lot of changes here in the last couple of years as it relates to the way that Valero works with the community, works in the community. The fact that I'm sitting in this chair is just an example of that, is that we're really trying to make sure that there are people here that at each one of our sites, places where we have major operations that have a vested interest in the community or supporting the community as we can. So here at the Houston Refinery, this refinery was built in 1944. We just celebrated last year our 75th anniversary. So it's gone through a variety of owners, variety of different companies have owned the refinery. Valero purchased this refinery in 1997 and took ownership in 98. So we've been here now for quite a bit of time. But Valero also has operations all throughout the world. We are based in San Antonio, so we are a Texas company, but we have operations in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Peru, and Mexico. So what we always say is we're a global company with Texas roots. So that's kind of where we are. We have 350 employees here at the Houston Refinery, some of whom actually grew up right here in the East End. And so part of what we're trying to do is reach out within this community our approach as it relates to community relations is really community driven. We don't want to come into a community and say, this is what you need. We want the community to tell us what they need, and then how can we leverage our resources, how can we leverage our expertise to help make people's lives better, especially within some of the marginalized communities here in the East End.
Great. And then can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing to help fight COVID-19?
Sure. Well, Valero across the world has been doing a lot. And so we, one of the things that we were able to do is actually support a lot of different organizations by converting one of our ethanol plants into a hand sanitizer manufacturing facility. And so we've been able to bottle ethanol, kind of corn-based alcohol hand sanitizer, and distribute that out to the community. Here in Houston, what we did is we actually distributed a lot of that out to our first response agencies. So Houston Police, Houston Fire, and Harris County Constable Precinct 6. We were actually able to hand that out. In addition, during that event, which was graciously organized by Frances and her staff chamber, and in partnership with Texas Mattress Makers, we were able to also feed all the East End first responders, police, fire, and constables, just to kind of show our appreciation for what they're doing. In addition, here in Houston, we've committed funding to a variety of different organizations to meet the community needs. Community Family Centers in right off of Harrisburg and 75th is one of our key partners. They're one of the only organizations that are really kind of meeting physical basic needs within this community. And so we're working a lot with them. The Tejano Center for Community Concerns is another organization that we partnered with. And so we're providing funding to allow them to expand their feeding programs. We know that the impact is not just being felt here in the oil industry. It's not just being felt, it's being disproportionately felt by people who are in service jobs. And so we know that a lot of folks here in this community are in those kinds of jobs. And so we want to make sure that we can do what we can with the resources that we have to be able to help meet these people's basic needs and then help them in the long term. So we're not just committed for feeding people on the front end. We want to make sure that we're investing in organizations that are doing job training, that are helping get people to a place where they can work and do great things. You can see in some of these photos a variety of different things we've done across here in Texas and across the world, really. You'll see, we've done hand sanitizer distributions everywhere. Those big bottles. I think we were all getting real tired of talking about hand sanitizer because it was what we were doing all over the country. We were able to provide some hand sanitizer to New York. We also just completed a donation of hand sanitizer to MD Anderson as well, which was a request that was made to help kind of keep our frontline workers safe. So we've also donated to the YWCA here in Houston and Precinct together to be able to support some of their homebound senior programs. We know that a lot of those folks are specifically more vulnerable to these types of issues related to COVID-19. And so we're in it here to try to help the community wherever they say they need help. And so we're working with a variety of different nonprofits right now to do our second round of funding. Valero, as a company, we've committed $1.8 million to the COVID response. And the latest numbers I've seen is that we've actually exceeded that $1.8 million. So there's quite a bit of support happening across the world for us to be able to help support the communities here in Houston, but then also all across the world where we have operations.
That's wonderful, Michael. And I know that you don't do this alone and you've got a big team there, but can you tell us a little bit how COVID has changed, though, working in the office for you and all of your employees?
Yeah, well, I think just like everybody, everybody who works in an office environment, we've had to make a few changes about the way we do shifting and going to virtual meetings and kind of the standard things that everybody's doing. We are an essential industry. Being able to continue to provide fuel is important to this response. It's important to keeping our economy going. And so Valero being able to provide, the gasoline and the diesel fuel and the jet fuel and, the ship fuel to keep all of these assets moving. That's what's going to keep people fed. That's what's going to keep people safe. And a lot of our products are feedstocks into products that are being used on the front lines every day. Plastics types of products. And so we're continuing to do that. Obviously we're continuing to maintain the highest quality of reliability and environmental excellence as well. So none of that has changed. All of our people are still working. The expectations have not changed. We continue to keep this refinery running well. And we are hoping to continue to do that even more. What we are, I mean, for instance, right now, I'm supposed to be at a mask distribution that we're sponsoring in Jacinto City. And so, you know, after this, I'll be heading up there. But you know, we're constantly doing something, and we're getting calls every day, and we're trying to do our best to meet the community's needs.
Great. Well, I've got our first question here. How has life changed for the refinery workers? I know you touched a little bit about that, but the refinery workers, how has life changed for them?
Well, from a work perspective, you know, our employees are continuing to stay on the job. Obviously, like every other company, we're doing our best to help keep our employees safe. That's providing hand sanitizer and masks and all the things that every other company is doing. You know, we have had some modifications to shifts as a way of kind of separating people and keeping them separate. But we're, you know, continuing to run pretty much as normal. Obviously, there's a lot of concern. There's a lot of concern from our employees in our community. And so we're continuing to maintain our operations and doing that as safely as possible.
Great. And I know that Valero gives back to the community in many, many ways. And, you know, the Valero Open, is there a situation happening with that you can share with us?
We don't have anything quite yet available to share. What I can tell you is that this year's Benefit for Children golf tournament did not occur because of COVID-19. It was canceled or postponed. And so as of yet, that has not occurred. So we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. But we are definitely still committed to using the money raised from that event to continue to support children's charities here, specifically in the Houston area.
Great. So I've got another question for you. With the uncertainty in the industry, how has Valero maintained a positive work environment?
You know, Valero is, we're really a leader when it comes to maintaining a good balance sheet and keeping our business running as efficiently as possible. We run very well. We run very lean as just a good business practice. We spend money where we need to spend money when it comes to reliability, environmental protection, and those kinds of things. And we're always looking at what's the best way to run this and to be the most efficient. So I think that's one thing I can, as a Valero employee, it makes me very confident that we're able to continue. You know, and this is an unfortunate situation. A lot of our partners in the upstream industry are getting really hit right now. You know, from a refining perspective, we're going to continue to do what we do, and we're going to continue to do it as best as we can.
Great. Another question here is, what has been your favorite community connection through this time?
Oh, there have been a lot. You know, I got a phone call today from one of our employees who, we also do a Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And so she's paired with a little girl here in the community, and this little girl, she was talking to her on the phone. Typically what we do is we go to the schools and meet the students, but because of COVID, we can't do that. And so they've set up times for us to be able to call our littles, myself included. And so we talk to them on the phone or FaceTime with them once a week. And she was telling me that, you know, that girl doesn't have food. They don't have enough food right now because mom's been furloughed and the sister is not getting the number of hours she was getting. So my employees are saying, what can we do? And so we're even just one-on-one stepping into these situations and helping families. And that's not driven by Valero corporate. That's being driven by the people here at the refinery. Our folks are really invested in this community and wanting to make sure that we meet these people's needs. One example is one project we're working on right now. There's a nonprofit we support called Kids Meals. And it's basically a Meals on Wheels for preschool age kids. And so what they do is you enroll them and they come into the program, and then they're able to get a meal every single day delivered to their door. Well, what they normally deliver a sack lunch, like in a brown paper bag. Well, what they do now is they have volunteers that decorate the bags. So we have our volunteers right now. This is one good volunteer project that we can do without having to really interact with people. And so our employees are taking these home Their kids are all home from school with nothing to do. They're having them decorate the bags, and then they're filling them with basic snack pack items that the nonprofit has shared with us. And so that's just one example, is that people are stepping up. You know, community family centers, we funded them with money, but we're also doing a food drive for them right now because they're out of canned goods. And so we contacted them and said, what are the things that you need? You know, we're going to buy the things that are popular with people in this community, things that people are going to work for people in this community. And so it's been incredible to see our employees step up and say, what are we doing? What can we do? We produced just a couple pages of some of the different things we've done. You know, we did the event with Houston Police and Houston Fire and the Constable. You know, we've provided meals to healthcare workers at Memorial Hermann. We've done a lot, and it's just been great to see our employees step up and say, hey, I know that there's this need here. What can we do to help? And that's part of my job, is being able to say, okay, we can step in and help and do this and help these people individually. We can help on a large scale, and we can help sometimes on a really personal one-to-one scale as well.
That's great. But if we have Roland still there, we're going to bring him back in, and we're going to ask a couple of questions about, you know, just organizational performances and things like that. But in regards to that, Michael, how has Valero changed or will be changing the direction of their leadership or the way that they work after COVID-19?
You know, we don't typically comment on how we change operations or how we do operations. You know, obviously, with like everybody else, we're looking at the different things that we can do right now and then moving forward. How do we maintain the safety? You know, safety is the #1 priority here at Valero. So we're never going to do anything unsafe, and so we're going to try to do our best to continue to protect our workforce. And then also, just we're never going to skimp on doing things that are good for our community, are good for the environment. Those are kind of the priorities that we are always focusing on.
Great. And then Roland, you know, I know you have a shoestring staff right now, but how are things going on with them, and what are they changes are going to be happening after COVID-19 with your staff, especially going into a bigger makerspace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a complex question. You know, I think the biggest question, you know, is what happens in terms of social distancing for the next, you know, however long, right? Do things return to normal? I think, you know, kind of one of the things that's shaking out in restaurants to some degree affects us, since we do a lot of classes and kind of activities that go on in social settings. You know, some of those things aren't feasible with social distancing requirements. You know, for instance, a restaurant at quarter capacities, a lot of that doesn't make sense for long periods of time. And so I think some of our biggest questions will be what happens with social distancing over the next, you know, 12, 18 months. And do we find ways to decrease that and return kind of back to the modalities we had before, or is that the new normal? I think that'll probably, you know, inform what happens with a lot of our classes, after school programs and other sorts of activities like that. I think we're seeing a lot more prototyping activity around COVID. So I think that we'll, you know, our prototyping staff, we actually are hiring right now for additional folks who have both manufacturing and engineering experience. You know, and then the job training market in the future is kind of unknown. You know, what's going to happen with oil and gas over the long term, I think, you know, may really impact a lot of the job opportunities here in Houston. And so it'll probably mean a retooling of our you know, job training. So I think there's a lot of changes on the horizon. I think not a lot of changes relating to our, you know, what we do, but how we deliver those things and what areas we focus on in the short term will, you know, I think most definitely change. I think the lucky thing for us is our staff is a staff of kind of jacks of all trades. So instead of having to, you know, hire new people and you know, let go folks with other skill sets, we're really just kind of, you know, pivoting a lot of our staff from, you know, teaching back to manufacturing, or from job training to prototyping. And so, you know, that kind of keeps our same core staff, just with different responsibilities in the short term.
Great, and we've got a good question here. So Michael, I know that one of your plants is doing hand sanitizer. Well, do you think that'll continue after COVID-19? Is that something that you want to continue, or is this just temporary? And then also, Roland, after that, we're going to ask the same question to you.
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to continue to meet the community needs however we can. Those plants in particular are built to produce ethanol. So as the market conditions change, we likely we'll be moving those back to what they're typically there to do, and so we'll continue to do that. If there is a need and we are able to meet that need, Valero will always try to find an opportunity to ensure that we're helping the community wherever we can. And if that means that we need to modify something, then that is something that we may do depending on kind of where the market's sitting.
Great. And Roland, do you think that you will continue with what you're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, how we continue will be driven, we're a nonprofit, right? So what we focus on really is based on community need. So, I think we'll continue focusing on this as long as we see that there is, value in our participation. We're not, getting we're not getting returns or profits from it. So we're not really focused on where the profit is. We're focused on where the need is. And then, as my assumption is that barring any unforeseen, incidents, is that the kind of natural market for PPE and, hand sanitizer and all these other sorts of things will stabilize. And then the need will be the economic picture, right? Retraining folks for what jobs do exist, maybe helping manufacturers become, more efficient, or focusing on helping them start up new product lines to, explore areas that they haven't focused on before that may be more pertinent now. Maybe the areas that we focus on once we pass the kind of PPE, crisis.
Good answer. And so at the Chamber, we're all working remotely, and we've started using a program called Slack to keep communications open. What have you guys been seeing that is most useful to keep your team communications open? We'll start with you, Michael.
Well, we continue to have folks here on site. So, when we have the people here on site, we're going back to traditional means. I mean, we're printing posters and putting them up in break areas and satellite houses and things like that. We also have a notification system that allows us to reach out to our employees, which comes in handy, especially because we do have a population of employees that are shift workers, and so we may have one shift on, and then we have 3 shifts not on at the site. And so in order to communicate something pretty quickly, or a policy change or something like that, we've been using that system. So we can send our employees a text message, let them know, hey, we've got a policy change with travel, or if you're coming into the plant, you need to know that this is what's going on, and all of those things can be communicated. So that's been really helpful. Valero also has an intranet site, so we're able to share information. I'm working on a page right now that's going to share all of our community impacts and ways that people can get involved. We're using, like I said, our traditional means like posters, but we went out the other day and we shot a video at CFC where we were just able to have Patty Morales, if you all know her, she runs their basic needs services out there. Just tell us, what is she doing? What does she need? What are the things that they're doing to respond? And we're hoping that that's a good way to communicate with our employees as to where they can get involved, how they can, either donate to the food pantry or get involved some other way.
Great. And Roland?
We're a pretty small group, and we do mostly manufacturing and prototyping. So to be honest with you, it's not really very possible to work remotely. There's just too much equipment needed, and tools and shared work that's being done. So we still actually, almost all of us work in not close proximity, but we're all in the same building together. So we do have a lot of our administrative staff have moved remotely. And so, we have a small administrative staff. So we've been using Zoom and a lot of text messaging and a lot of Google Docs to share information there. But mostly for the prototyping manufacturing staff, we've really just been, focusing on mask usage and, trying to maintain social distancing. And we've separated everyone to try to work them in different areas. So we're not, working in the same rooms. We each have our own little prototyping area, and we try to minimize kind of the shared spaces. But in that regard, it hasn't changed a lot because we're still in the same building.
Great. Well, I love your background. That's the real life of TXOX Labs. But we've got one final question for both of you. And how have you personally been managing your home life during COVID-19? And what was one fun thing that you did or that you're going to do? Michael, we'll go with you first.
Well, so for a while I was working partially from home, and so there was a lot of daddy time. I have a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and so my wife was home as well. So for us, it was just a lot of running around and a lot of keeping kids occupied. And you know, typically you could go to the zoo, and I can't take the kids to the zoo, and so for us, it's just been, you know, just like everybody else, is just staying home and continuing to do our best. You know, we have a very active church community that was checking in on us, and we were having virtual church a couple times a week, and which was great. And then just, you know, we were just trying to find fun opportunities for the kids to do something. We're a lot of going for walks. We went for a couple hikes, you know, socially distance hikes to make sure that they got out and got some exercise, they got some sunlight. There were some, you know, sprinklers in the backyard for the kids and things like that. But it is, you know, this is challenging for a lot of folks. You know, we're very blessed that I still have a job and that we're able to continue going on. And so we've just been doing our best to really be grateful that we are where we are and that we can spend time with our kids during that period of time.
Great. And Roland, you know, I myself got my bike fixed, and I've started riding that. Anything fun you've done, or how are you balancing work and home life?
I'm possibly the worst person to ask this question because I'm a workaholic. I'm actually a volunteer. So I volunteered for the past 11 years. And under normal circumstances, I work between 12 and 14 hours a day, probably 7 days a week. So this is my hobby. You know, most people go to work. This isn't really work for me. You know, I do this just because I enjoy it. So really nothing has changed for me, actually, to tell you the truth. It's a little bit surprising for me. I talk to everyone and everyone says I'm at home with my family and I'm going crazy, get me out of here. And to me, really nothing has changed. I go to work for 12 or 14 hours. What I'm doing is slightly different. Instead of prototyping, you know, skids for oil and gas or metering systems or electromagnets, now I'm prototyping respirators and you know, shields and stuff like that. But you know, this is fun for me. So sadly, I think I'm probably one of the few people that my job is my enjoyment. So I don't really have, I don't know, other than getting a job that you love and think is the funnest thing in the world. I don't really know if I have any great suggestions.
That's a great way. And again, this is a Feel Good Friday interview, and you guys really have made me feel good. And I really appreciate, I know everybody that's listening to this appreciates all that you individually are doing and then collectively are doing. Hurricane season is right around the corner, and I'm sure that we've learned a lot of lessons from the last ones to help us prepare for that. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that we can get through that one without too much fear and disaster. But I did wanted to remind everyone that we are doing Feel Good Fridays every Friday. So if you have somebody in the community that you would like us to interview and you can learn about them, send us an email and let us know. Also, we've created an East End Strong Facebook page for restaurants and businesses to showcase their hours and what they're doing. So hopefully you guys can like that and share that. We have a special event on Mother's Day items, the items that you can purchase here in the East End, shopping local to keep our East End strong. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Roland, thank you so much. Michael, thank you so much. And happy Mother's Day to anyone out there.
Thank you for reminding me that it's Mother's Day.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. You guys have a good one.
Okay.